Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. I'm your host, Curtis Smith. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. And as always, just a tremendous thank you to the community partners who make it possible for us to have a show each and every week. Prime 47 Downtown, Shepherd Community Center, and Tesco. Without their support, we would not be here every Thursday night. And of course, a huge shout out to WHMB TV 40 for hosting us. Well, we've been so privileged to occasionally sit down with men and women who shape the laws and policies behind the running of our state. And tonight we once again get to hear from one of those people. State Senator Travis Holdman is one of the most tenured members of the Indiana State Senate. And recently I got to sit down with Senator Holdman in Fort Wayne. Here's part one of our conversation. We're sitting down with State Senator Travis Holdman. Travis, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
You've been a state senator now for almost 15 years. That has to have been an interesting ride. What has it been like for you the last 15 years serving in the State House?
Well, it's been interesting and been a ride. I've enjoyed it. I think the thing that I enjoy most is constituent work, folks calling my office in Indy or calling me directly if they get my cell phone number, which is out there. And folks have an opportunity to call if they have problems with Bureau of Motor Vehicles or Department of Revenue, Department of Environmental Management, DCS. I get a lot of calls about DCS, Department of Child Services, which is sort of a link to my background. My wife and I did short-term missionary work in Haiti for nearly a couple of years right after we got married and came back, and I was the DCS director in Wells County for 11 years before I left to go back and get my law degree. And so there were just two of us in the Senate that had any experience working in the Department of Child Services and Child Protective Services, and so now I'm the only one left, and so I get lots of calls and field lots of complaints and concerns folks have about what goes on in DCS. But David Long had appointed me to chair the Banking and Insurance Committee back shortly after I started in the Senate, because I have a banking background, 12 years as CEO of Markle Bank and IAB here in Fort Wayne. And then with the retirement of the chair of the Tax and Fiscal Policy Committee, he asked me to take over the Tax Committee, and so I've done that now going on 5 years. So it's been a ride, and it's been exciting. You get involved in a lot of discussions and some of the backroom things that go on that in the planning phase, which has been exciting for us, and putting Indiana out on the front edge to make us more competitive. It's been exciting to be a part of those decisions and part of that decision making.
Tell me about that, because I do feel like, maybe not exactly over your time in the Senate, but certainly over the last 15 years, maybe a little bit longer, Indiana's profile nationally really has risen. I think our position nationally has really escalated. From your vantage point, being in those backroom discussions, have you seen that profile rise for the Hoosier State?
Yeah, and it really started with Mitch Daniels when Mitch was governor, and I worked with his office and several pieces of legislation for the governor's office back then. And we moved things along, moved Indiana up. We paid off a lot of debt. Restructured taxes. If folks remember, we took over all of the funding for Department of Child Services. The state took over all of that. The state took over all the funding for schools operational expenses, and made a huge difference. We did have to raise the sales tax. That was the year before I came to the Senate. Sales tax was raised a penny to 7 cents from 6. But restructured a lot with property tax. We have moved Indiana up to be one of the top states, one of the top state in the Midwest for business tax and corporate tax, individual tax. Property taxes is folks, as much angst as there is right now with local assessments and local property tax bills because of the change in the economy and what's going on with housing in Indiana and all across the country, actually. Yeah. Indiana still is ranked number one in low property taxes for the consumer, and so there's a lot of things we can be proud of in Indiana. Plus, we've been able to build a huge reserve. one of the things that Mitch Daniels did was put a program into place called the automatic taxpayer refund. If our revenues come in and we build a reserve past 12.5% of our budget, then the following year we have to basically give that back to the taxpayer, and those deposits are going in right now as we speak. $125 per taxpayer and $250 for joint filers. It's not as exciting as $700 checks that you get from the federal government or some of the incentive money that's come from the federal government, but those are borrowed dollars. Indiana's are actually real dollars in the bank that we've got, and that's not borrowed money, and so we're excited about that. The other thing that we've been able to do is pay down retirement debt that we owe. We have a huge unfunded liability. When I started in the Senate, it was about $20 billion that we owed in unfunded liability for teacher retirement funds. Come 30 days from now, we will pay an additional $2.5 billion down of that debt, which will get us down in the neighborhood of about $6 billion. Wow. And there's going to be a cliff come in about 5 or 6 years, and that legislature is going to have about $1 billion windfall because we pay out of the budget that we pass every 2 years, we pay $1 billion a year to pay off that unfunded liability. And so hopefully the legislature at that time, whether I'm there or not, will just give it back to the taxpayer rather than fund more government programs.
Yeah. Let's talk about the future. You're up for election this fall. You are about to be at the 15-year mark. As you think about your future in the state Senate, what do you think that looks like?
Well, I've become one of the senior senators in just a short amount of time. When I started, folks have been there 25, 30 years, and the 2010 election, the 2014 election, and then 16, there was a huge turnover in the number of folks leaving the Senate, and we had 6 folks that retired from the Senate just this year. And so we've seen a huge shift in historical knowledge of everything that goes on in the Senate and the process and how that goes. We have a new pro tem that's been in now for 2.5 years, 3 years, since David Long retired. And so there's been a great change, and it's a different place than it was when I started. I'm one of the older guys, and back then I thought I was one of the younger guys, but it's a different place than before.
I'm sure. We're going to continue our conversation with State Senator Travis Holdman when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Curtis Smith. We're going to continue part 2 of our conversation now with State Senator Travis Holdman. In the second part of our chat, Senator Holdman discusses some of the progress we've been able to make in the area of mental health. Continuing our conversation with Senator Travis Holdman. Travis, you mentioned a few minutes ago that you had worked at DCS, and it seems like that's a good pivot point to take our conversation into the mental health space. I know on both sides of the State House, you guys have done incredible work to try to address some of the mental health issues in the Hoosier State, where we historically have not ranked very well. From your perspective, what kind of progress have you seen over the last few years, especially in that space?
Well, I think we've identified the fact that we have a mental health issue, and I think just in the last 18 months, 2 years, it's even been amplified with the pandemic. And then such things as mass shootings, those kind of things, just raises that subject even higher on the agenda. I think one of the accomplishments that we've made is hundreds of millions of dollars that we have pumped into government services through schools, through mental health clinics, through hospitals, physicians' practices, hospitals, everybody that touches anything to do with mental health and kids and families. We've pumped hundreds of millions of dollars into those programs, utilizing many times federal monies that have been available to us, especially with pandemic funding. But I think it's one thing that we can be proud of, but I'm not sure that we have a solution necessarily, because so much of it comes from society, and things that we can't fix and wave a magic wand and fix or throw money at it and it's going to fix it, because of single parent families and all of those kind of issues, fatherless families that are out there, that it's just it's very difficult for us. Drug issues.
A lot of those issues are generational too. So even if you're on the right path, it's hard sometimes to know because you might not see the results for 10 or 20 years.
That's true. That's true. It's very disconcerting because you get stuck in a cycle, and kids model behavior that their parents exhibit. And if it's bad behavior, kids will model that same behavior. And we have a lot of young teens as parents these days, and they were raised by teenagers, and some of the behaviors haven't been the best for society as we move from one generation to the next.
So knowing that it is a hard thing to get your arms wrapped around, it is something that might take years or decades to really make real progress. As you think about your pending election this fall and continuing to be a member of the state Senate, what do you think about in terms of how you can move the needle? How can we make progress into the future? What's on your mind? What's on your agenda in the mental health space going forward now?
Well, one of the things that I think we can do will help when we identify a family in crisis, that we really look at a home-based model to assemble a whole group of services available to families who have needs, whether it comes to us through DCS or through the school corporation. I think there's opportunities for us to help that family out, whether it's with counseling or homemaker services or just health issues, getting proper health that the children and mothers and fathers need, employment, all those kind of things, that whole spectrum that makes up our society and things we can do better. I think assembling a team approach to helping those families is really what we need to do. Not that we're going to be the big brother to solve all the issues and all the problems for people, but just make those services available to families. And the not-for-profit community has done an outstanding job here in Indiana, and we can be very proud of what the not-for-profit community has done.
Outside of mental health, as you think about getting into another term and thinking about being one of the senior members of the state Senate, as you mentioned, what other accomplishments would you love to see here over the next couple of years?
Making sure that state government runs efficiently. Nothing frustrates me any more than just when we deal with a state agency to be told, well, this is not how we do it. Well, tell me why this is how you do it and why you continue to do things that aren't working. And I think just being more efficient. I think probably one of my heroes is Mitch Daniels. When I think back, one of the things that he did with the motor pool after he first started as governor, he went, and the story is that they went out and they put a penny on the top of the tire in all the cars in the motor pool throughout Indianapolis that were state-owned vehicles. They went back a month later, and if the penny was still on the tire, they towed the vehicle and sold it because they didn't need it. Got lots of folks upset about that, but basically it's running government as efficiently as we possibly can and empower the taxpayer to take care of themselves and to run their own life and not the government do it for them.
That seems very Indiana, very Midwest, to just be about common sense, to be practical. Yes. Something we talked about a few minutes ago, our state has gotten a lot better at that, but you'd like to still see even more improvement.
I think there's lots of opportunity for privatization in many realms and freeing up folks to do the job that they're hired to do. Sort of an entrepreneurial spirit about state government that sometimes we get bogged down and just a myopic view of how things ought to be done when we need to take in and think outside the box sometimes. I think we could benefit from that.
As we close here, I suspect a lot of Hoosiers probably don't have a great feel for what your life looks like as a state senator, what day-to-day is like when you're in session. Paint that picture for us. What is it like when you're there running the state?
At the State House?
Yeah.
I see a lot of people want my ear to talk to me about issues that they have. We have constituents that come and visit the State House, and constituents come first. If I hear that there's a school group in the State House or a group of teachers in the State House from my district, or city officials from my district, I'll cancel other appointments, especially with lobbyists, if that's the appointment, to talk to constituents. But then as well, I'm also caucus chairman, and so I deal with a lot of issues within the caucus itself, how folks get along with each other, and just running the caucus from day to day is sometimes a challenge for me.
I was going to say that can't be fun every day.
No comment.
Travis, thank you so much for sitting down with us and sharing your insight. We really appreciate it, and thanks for your service to our state.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll be right back. Welcome back. Each week here on Restoring Hope, we focus on that one key word, hope. Crosswinds executive Abe Hepler is here to bring us a word from the Word of God. Tonight, he's in the book of 1 John.
Hi, I'm Abe Hepler. If you're anything like me, if your life is anything like mine, I find myself living at a crazy pace. I have 2 teenage kids, an 8-year-old, and my wife and I's schedules, and when you mix all of those things together, we are constantly on the go. One of the things that I have learned about myself is that when the pace of my life is this busy, when I'm not getting consistent rest, I also discover that I start to feel hopeless. Like there's no end in sight to the times that feel hard and challenging and difficult. And if you feel this way, this is not new. Lots of people feel this way, and in fact, lots of people have felt this way throughout history. There's a passage, an idea in the book of 1 John in the New Testament that I want to share with you. It's found in 1 John chapter 3. And in 1 John chapter 3, John is writing and he says this, "Dear friends, now we are children of God." John starts by describing who we are right now in this moment. Through Jesus Christ, we have been declared to be children of God. And then he says, "And what we will be one day in the future has not yet been made known. But what we do know is that when Jesus Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we will see him as he is. And everyone who has this hope purifies himself just as Jesus is pure." Now, John's making a couple of points here, but ultimately what he says is, all of us feel in the moment like there are difficult, challenging, hard things to face, and there are. There are difficult and challenging and hard things to face, but there will come a day when Jesus Christ is coming back for his people. There is an unimaginable future waiting for us outside of these challenges. Christ is coming back for his children. There will be a time when everything we're facing gets made right. And when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel like we can't take it any longer, if we'll stop and look to the future that we have been promised, if we'll just look to what's coming, we discover hope.
Welcome back to Restoring Hope with Crosswinds Counseling. In this week's Counseling Corner segment, Phil Erickson joins us to discuss one of the most common topics covered in all of counseling, marriage.
Hi, my name is Phil Erickson, and I'm a licensed therapist at Crosswinds Counseling. I'm here to tell you about my biggest passion as a therapist, and that is doing marriage counseling. Now, some of you may ask, why marriage? Why help people rebuild their marriage? Well, it's because I love seeing happy marriages. You know, more often than not, when marriages start to crumble or derail, is because they forget the fundamentals. They forget the things that got them to get married. Usually when people get married, when they say those I do's, they love each other. There's passion, there's joy, there's excitement for the future together. But they sometimes, especially over time, forget those things. And it's easy, it's understandable why that can happen. But in therapy, I try to help rebuild that trust and passion that they have for each other so that they're excited and able to love in their marriage again. I try to remind them of the good times and the good memories that they have, also the things that they've succeeded at, instead of just pointing out the stuff in the areas where they're failing. Okay? Now, if you're out there wondering if counseling or marriage counseling is right for you, I recommend that you don't hesitate. Therapy is best done preventative and not reactionary, meaning instead of waiting for things to get to a explosion point where things are just really pressing and really difficult, it's easier to work on things one at a time. So instead of waiting, it's better just to come in, and we have a lot of people here at Crosswinds Counseling that would love to provide some encouragement and hope for whatever thing that you're going through.
Thanks, Phil. Always good to have you with us tonight, and good to have all of you with us tonight as well. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Tesco, Prime 47 Downtown, and Shepherd Community Center for being our partners tonight. We'll see you next Thursday at 9:30 right here on WHMB TV 40.